Have you ever wondered how an entire civilization could speak to us from thousands of years in the past? The ancient Egyptians did just that, not with voices, but with a language so beautiful and mysterious it was believed to be a gift from the gods themselves. This is the story of hieroglyphs. Imagine standing in the cool darkness of an ancient temple, the air thick with the scent of incense and thyme. Your torchlight flickers across the stone walls, and suddenly, they come alive. Thousands of intricate symbols, a stunning tapestry of birds, snakes, human figures, and geometric shapes seem to glow with an inner light. This wasn't just decoration. This was the language of the divine, the sacred script the Egyptians called Medu Neter, or the words of God. They believed that Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, knowledge, and magic, had gifted writing to humanity. It was a tool of immense power, a bridge between the mortal world and the eternal realm of the gods. Because of its divine origin, hieroglyphic writing was reserved for the most important places and purposes. You wouldn't find it scribbled on a shopping list. Instead, it adorned the massive walls of temples dedicated to gods like Ra and Isis, telling stories of creation and cosmic battles. It covered the surfaces of towering obelisks, proclaiming the power and achievements of the pharaohs for all to see. And most importantly, it was meticulously carved and painted inside the tombs of kings and queens, deep beneath the desert sands. Why in the tombs? Because for the Egyptians, writing was the key to immortality. They believed that to speak a person's name was to make them live again. By carving a pharaoh's name and life story into the walls of their final resting place, they ensured their existence for eternity. The hieroglyphs were a magical formula, a permanent record that guaranteed the deceased soul, or Ka, could navigate the treacherous journey through the underworld and successfully reach the afterlife. The field of reeds, the words themselves held the power to activate spells from the Book of the Dead, protecting the soul from demons and monsters. Without these written words, a soul could be lost forever. So, writing wasn't just communication, it was a vital piece of resurrection technology. This divine and magical script was not for everyone. The ability to read and write hieroglyphs was a closely guarded secret, a privilege held by a very small, elite group. At the top of this group were the priests who used the sacred texts to perform rituals and communicate with the gods. But the true masters of the craft were the scribes. Becoming a scribe was one of the best career paths in ancient Egypt. It was a difficult and lengthy education, often starting at the age of 5 or 6. Young boys would spend years in a special school called the House of Life, which was often attached to a temple. There, they would practice for endless hours, copying texts onto broken pieces of pottery or limestone because papyrus was far too expensive for students. They had to memorize hundreds of different hieroglyphic signs. Unlike our simple 26-letter alphabet, hieroglyphs were much more complex. There were 3 main types of signs. First, there were phonograms, which represented sounds similar to our letters. For example, a symbol of a horned viper stood for the F sound. Then there were logograms, which were signs that represented a whole word. A picture of a leg could mean the word leg, but it could also mean to walk or to run. Finally, there were determinatives. These were silent signs placed at the end of a word to give the reader a clue about its meaning. For example, if a word ended with the symbol of a man, you knew it was a word related to a person or their occupation. A seated man with his hand to his mouth could indicate concepts like eating, speaking, or even thinking. Mastering this complex system took incredible dedication. Scribes had to be not only literate, but also skilled artists, as each hieroglyph was a miniature work of art. The precision required was immense. We can see this in the incredible detail of the carvings that have survived for millennia. Imagine a priest or scribe, chisel and mallet in hand, patiently chipping away at a massive block of limestone or granite, carefully forming each symbol. Every line had to be perfect, not just for clarity, but out of respect for the gods whose words they were carving. It was a slow, meditative process, a sacred duty. The power and prestige that came with this knowledge were immense. A scribe was exempt from manual labor and taxation. They were the administrators, the accountants, the lawyers, and the librarians of ancient Egypt. They managed the vast estates of the pharaoh and the temples, recorded harvests, calculated taxes, and wrote legal contracts. In a society where perhaps only 1% of the population could read and write, the scribe held the keys to power, knowledge, and wealth. They were the backbone of the entire Egyptian bureaucracy, the ones who kept the machinery of the kingdom running smoothly for over 3,000 years. Their status was so high that many non-royal statues that have survived from ancient Egypt are of scribes, often depicted sitting cross-legged with a papyrus scroll on their lap, ready to write. This pose became a symbol of wisdom and elite status. The sacred nature of hieroglyphs meant they were perfect for monuments meant to last forever, but for everyday business, they were far too slow and complicated. Imagine trying to quickly jot down how many bags of grain were just delivered using hundreds of tiny, perfect pictures. It just wasn't practical. The Egyptians needed a faster, more efficient way to write for daily tasks like letters, records, and administration. And so, alongside the beautiful hieroglyphs, they developed a cursive script called hieratic. If hieroglyphs were like our formal, printed capital letters, hieratic was like our joined-up handwriting. It was a simplified, flowing version of the hieroglyphic signs, adapted for writing quickly with a reed brush and ink on papyrus. The recognizable pictures of animals and objects in hieroglyphs became more abstract, stylized strokes in hieratic. A complex bird symbol might be reduced to just a few quick flicks of the wrist. This allowed scribes to write much more rapidly. Hieratic became the script of government, business, and literature. When you read ancient Egyptian love poems, medical texts, or ghost stories, they were almost always written in hieratic on papyri. This was the script used to manage the construction of the pyramids, to record court proceedings, and to send messages across the kingdom. While hieroglyphs were the language of eternity, frozen in stone, hieratic was the language of the living, capturing the dynamic pulse of daily life in Egypt. Later on, around the 7th century BC, an even more simplified and faster script emerged, called Demotic. This became the common script for everyday use, while hieratic was still used for religious texts and hieroglyphs were reserved almost exclusively for those monumental carvings on temple walls. So, an educated Egyptian scribe from the late period might have needed to know all three scripts: hieroglyphs for the temple, hieratic for literature, and demotic for a business contract. For thousands of years, this vibrant system of writing flourished. But as Egypt was conquered by a succession of foreign powers, the Persians, the Greeks under Alexander the Great, and finally the Romans, the old ways began to fade. The rise of Christianity was the final blow. The ancient Egyptian temples were closed down, the old gods were abandoned, and the knowledge of the sacred hieroglyphs, once the cornerstone of a civilization, was lost. The last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved in the Temple of Philae in 394 AD. After that, silence. For the next 1400 years, the meaning of the beautiful symbols on Egyptian temples and monuments was a complete mystery. Scholars and adventurers looked at them in wonder, but no one could understand them. They were seen as magical symbols or allegorical pictures, not a true written language. Many tried to decipher them, but all failed. The voice of ancient Egypt had been silenced, locked away in a code that no one could crack. The key was lost, and the civilization that gave us the pyramids and the Sphinx had fallen mute. But the story doesn't end there. The quest to unlock the secrets of the hieroglyphs is one of the greatest detective stories in history, a tale of scholarly rivalry, a lucky discovery in the mud of the Nile Delta, and the genius of one young man who would finally give the pharaohs their voice back. And that's a story for next time. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed learning about the language of the gods, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode where we uncover the thrilling story of the Rosetta Stone and the decipherment of hieroglyphs. See you then.
History isn't just what happened, it's what was hidden. Welcome to the Chrono Archives, where lost empires rise again, forgotten legends speak, and ancient truths are brought back to life. From world-shaping history and powerful myths to legendary rulers and timeless civilizations, every story here is carefully uncovered, deeply researched, and cinematically told. The past is calling, will you answer? Subscribe and journey through time, one unforgettable chronicle at a time.
Have you ever wondered how we know so much about ancient Egypt? The pharaohs, the gods, the epic battles, the daily lives of ordinary people. It's like a story that spans thousands of years. But where did we get all this information? The answer is literally written in stone. The ancient Egyptians were master record keepers, and they left us an incredible library carved into the very world around them. Today, we're going on a treasure hunt to find these clues hidden in plain sight. Let's start with the most iconic structures of all, the pyramids. When you step inside one of these massive tombs, you're not just entering a building, you're stepping into a history book. The walls of the inner chambers and long, winding corridors are often covered from floor to ceiling with intricate hieroglyphs. These aren't just random decorations. They are spells, prayers, and instructions intended to guide the deceased pharaoh on their perilous journey through the underworld. They tell the story of the pharaoh's life, their divine connections, and their hopes for an eternal afterlife. Each symbol, each line of text, was carefully placed to ensure their soul would triumph over the dangers of the netherworld and be reborn in the field of reeds. It's a magical and spiritual roadmap designed to last for eternity. One of the most famous examples is the Pyramid of Unas. From the outside, it might look a bit rough compared to its more famous neighbors at Giza, but inside, it holds a groundbreaking secret. Its burial chamber walls are inscribed with what we now call the pyramid texts. These are the oldest known religious writings in the world. They are a collection of incantations to protect the pharaoh's remains, reanimate his body after death, and help him ascend to the heavens to live among the gods. It's like a divine instruction manual, and it gives us an unparalleled window into the spiritual beliefs of the Old Kingdom, over 4,000 years ago. But the story doesn't end with the pyramids. As we move forward in time, we find these sacred texts evolving. In the Middle Kingdom, they began to appear on sarcophagi, the ornate coffins that held the mummy. These are known as the coffin texts. They expanded upon the pyramid texts, making the afterlife accessible not just to royalty, but also to wealthy private citizens. The spells became more personalized, addressing the specific challenges an individual might face. The surface of the coffin itself became a canvas for this magical protection, a final layer of spiritual armor for the deceased. And then comes the most famous of all funerary texts, the Book of the Dead. This wasn't a single book in the way we think of one today, but rather a collection of spells and chapters that a person could choose from to be buried with. Usually written on papyrus scrolls and placed within the tomb or even wrapped within the mummy's bandages, the Book of the Dead was like the ultimate travel guide to the afterlife. It contained spells for everything, from breathing air in the underworld to preventing your heart from testifying against you during the final judgment. Its most famous scene, the weighing of the heart, where the deceased's heart is weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and justice, is a powerful depiction of their concept of morality and cosmic order. These scrolls are some of the most beautifully illustrated artifacts from ancient Egypt, filled with vibrant colors and detailed drawings that bring their vision of the afterlife to life. So we have pyramids, coffins, and scrolls. But the pharaohs didn't travel into the afterlife empty-handed. They were buried with a staggering array of items, and many of these are also covered in hieroglyphs. Think about the magnificent treasures found in Tutankhamun's tomb. His golden shrines, his chariots, the boxes, and chests. All inscribed with his name, titles, and protective spells. These inscriptions weren't just for show. They magically linked the object to its owner, ensuring they could use it in the next life. By inscribing an object with a name, the Egyptians believed they were giving it a permanent identity and purpose for eternity. But it's not all about the grand and the golden. The clues to ancient Egyptian life are also found on the most humble, everyday objects. Let's talk about pottery. A simple clay pot might seem boring, but a few hieroglyphs on its side can tell us so much. It could name the contents, like wine of the Western River, telling us about their agriculture and trade. It might name the owner or the workshop where it was made. These small details help archaeologists piece together the economic and social fabric of the time. They're like little labels that have survived for millennia, giving us a snapshot of daily commerce and life. Then there are amulets. These small charms were worn by both the living and the dead for protection and good fortune. They were often shaped like gods, animals, or powerful symbols, like the ankh, the symbol of life, or the scarab beetle, a symbol of rebirth and creation. Many of these tiny objects are inscribed with short spells or the names of gods. A person might wear an amulet with the Eye of Horus for protection against evil, or one dedicated to the goddess Taurus for safety during childbirth. These weren't just jewelry, they were personal pieces of magic, tangible prayers that people carried with them every single day. They show us a much more personal side of Egyptian religion, away from the grand state temples. And that brings us to the core idea. For the ancient Egyptians, history wasn't just something you wrote down on paper. It was something you carved into the world itself. By inscribing their stories on temple walls, on obelisks piercing the sky, and on statues of their kings and gods, they were making their history permanent, monumental, and inescapable. When you walk through the great temple of Karnak, you are surrounded by the achievements of generations of pharaohs. The columns, walls, and gateways are covered with reliefs and hieroglyphs detailing military victories, religious festivals, and offerings to the gods. It was a form of public relations, a way for the pharaoh to communicate his power and piety to his people and to the gods. They believed that to speak a name was to make the person live again, and by carving these stories in stone, they ensured their legacy would never be forgotten. This is why we call it a history written in stone. From the towering pyramids that scrape the sky to the smallest amulet worn close to the heart, the ancient Egyptians left their story everywhere. Every symbol, every name, every spell is a puzzle piece. And by putting these pieces together, we can begin to understand their incredible civilization, not just as a collection of myths and legends, but as a real place filled with real people who lived, loved, feared, and hoped for eternity. Their voices echo down to us through these stone carvings and painted papyri, waiting for us to listen. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's truly amazing what we can learn when we know where to look. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of hieroglyphs, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into the ancient world. Let me know in the comments which Egyptian artifact you find the most fascinating. Until next time, stay curious. Imagine a language once spoken by millions, carved into stone monuments and whispered in the halls of pharaohs, suddenly falling silent. A complete and total silence that would last for 1,500 years. This is the incredible story of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, a language lost to time. How could a civilization so advanced, so powerful, simply have its voice extinguished? It all begins around the 4th century AD. As the Roman Empire's influence grew, so did Christianity. The old ways, the old gods, and the old script of Egypt began to fade. The grand temples, once centers of learning, where scribes meticulously carved these sacred symbols, were closed down. The last known hieroglyphic inscription dates to 394 AD, etched on the walls of the Temple of Philae. After that, nothing. The knowledge, passed down through generations of priests and scribes, vanished. The chain was broken. For the next millennium and a half, the meaning of these beautiful, intricate symbols became one of history's greatest mysteries. When medieval and Renaissance scholars from Europe and the Arab world encountered them, they were utterly stumped. They could see the birds, the snakes, the human figures, but they couldn't hear the words. Not a single person on Earth could read a single symbol. It's easy to see why they were so captivated and so confused. Without the key, the script looked like a collection of mystical pictures, not a functioning language. This led to all sorts of wild theories. Many believed hieroglyphs weren't letters or sounds at all, but profound philosophical concepts captured in a single image. They thought each symbol held some deep, magical meaning, a secret code to esoteric wisdom. The idea was that the Egyptians were so wise, they could communicate complex ideas, like eternity or divine power, with just one drawing. This magical interpretation, while romantic, sent scholars down the wrong path for centuries. They were trying to decode a book of spells, not a language. They'd stare at an owl symbol and debate its connection to wisdom or the night, instead of asking what sound it might represent. It was like trying to understand English by assuming the letter A is just a picture of a pointy object. The true nature of the script, a sophisticated mix of phonetic sounds and symbolic signs, remained hidden. The voices of the pharaohs were trapped in stone, waiting for someone to find the key. This long period of silence is fascinating because it shows how fragile knowledge can be. Imagine all of our digital data, our books, our languages, just disappearing. That's what happened to the ancient Egyptians. An entire culture's literature, history, and daily life were rendered unreadable. Inscriptions on towering obelisks became nothing more than decoration. Papyrus scrolls filled with stories and accounts became collections of pretty, but meaningless, drawings. Think about the frustration of the scholars who dedicated their lives to this puzzle. We have records of them traveling to Egypt, painstakingly copying the inscriptions, and returning home with pages full of symbols they couldn't decipher. They were standing before a library of knowledge from one of the world's greatest civilizations, but the door was locked and the key was lost. They were looking at history, but they couldn't read it. The perception of hieroglyphs as pure magic and mystery became deeply embedded in the popular imagination. It fueled a sense of awe and wonder about ancient Egypt, painting it as a land of otherworldly secrets and powerful sorcery. While this made for great stories, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of a brilliant and logical writing system. The silence of the hieroglyphs is a powerful reminder of what can be lost. For 1,500 years, the world could only guess at the stories these stones had to tell. The tales of epic battles, the love poems, the shopping lists, the prayers to the gods, all were silent. The journey to break that silence, to finally rediscover the lost language of the pharaohs, would require a stroke of luck and an incredible feat of intellectual detective work. And that's a story for next time. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, be sure to subscribe for more. For thousands of years, the secrets of ancient Egypt were locked away, trapped in silent symbols carved on temple walls and tombs. An entire civilization, its stories, its beliefs, its very voice, was lost to time. But then, in 1799, a group of French soldiers digging fortifications in the small Egyptian town of Rosetta unearthed a slab of dark, granitic rock. They had no idea they had just stumbled upon the key that would unlock a forgotten world. This was the Rosetta Stone, and it would change everything. What made this stone so special? It wasn't its size or its material. It was the text carved upon its surface. The same decree, a message of thanks to King Ptolemy V, was written in 3 different scripts. At the top, the beautiful and mysterious hieroglyphs, the sacred writing of the priests. In the middle, Demotic, the everyday script of the common Egyptian people. And at the bottom, crucially, was ancient Greek, a language scholars already knew and could read fluently. For the first time, there was a direct link, a bridge between the known and the unknown. It was like finding a dictionary for a language no one had spoken in millennia. The news of the discovery sent shockwaves through the academic world. Copies and casts of the stone were distributed to universities and scholars across Europe. The race was on. Who could be the first to crack the code? Many brilliant minds tried and failed. Some made small steps, correctly guessing that the ovals, called cartouches, might contain the names of royalty. An English scholar named Thomas Young made significant progress, correctly identifying the sounds for several symbols within Ptolemy's name. But he couldn't shake the belief that hieroglyphs were purely symbolic, that each picture represented a whole idea, not a sound. This assumption was a mental wall that he, and others, couldn't quite break through. The puzzle was fiendishly difficult. Imagine trying to read a language where a picture of a lion might mean the animal, the sound L, or the concept of bravery, all depending on context. That was the challenge. The ancient Egyptians used a complex system that blended logograms, which represent whole words, with phonograms, which represent sounds, much like our alphabet. Unraveling this intricate web required not just intelligence, but a complete shift in thinking. The world was holding its breath, waiting for a genius who could see past the pictures and hear the sounds they represented. That genius was a young Frenchman named Jean-François Champollion. He was obsessed with Egypt from childhood, a linguistic prodigy who had mastered a dozen languages, including Coptic, the liturgical language of Egyptian Christians, and a direct descendant of the ancient Egyptian tongue. Champollion dedicated his entire life to this one single goal: to read the hieroglyphs. He understood that Coptic held the phonetic keys to the past. He spent years hunched over copies of the inscription, comparing the hieroglyphs with the Greek and Demotic texts, filling notebooks with theories and cross-references. He wasn't just working, he was living inside the puzzle. Champollion's big breakthrough came when he started focusing on the royal names inside the cartouches. He already had Ptolemy's name from the Rosetta Stone. Then, he got his hands on an inscription from an obelisk that had another cartouche, one believed to contain the name of a famous queen. Using Young's initial ideas as a springboard, he began substituting the known sound values from Ptolemy into the new name. He had P, T, and L. He hypothesized the name was Cleopatra. He meticulously assigned phonetic values to the remaining symbols in her name: K, L, E, O, P, T, R, A. The sounds fit. For the first time, he was not just guessing, he was reading. But the final, earth-shattering moment of confirmation came in September 1822. Champollion was studying copies of inscriptions from the temple at Abu Simbel. He saw a cartouche with a symbol for the sun in Coptic, Rot, followed by a symbol he didn't recognize, and then to symbols for S. He knew the S sound from the names Ptolemy and Cleopatra. Putting it together, he sounded it out. Ra, SS. Suddenly, it hit him. He knew the name of a famous pharaoh, Ramesses. The middle symbol had to be Mes, Ramesses. It worked. He then looked at another cartouche, this one containing an ibis, the symbol for the god Thoth. Following the same logic, he sounded it out, Thothmes. Thutmose, another great pharaoh. It was the eureka moment that changed history. The hieroglyphs were not just pictures, they were a flexible, sophisticated writing system combining sounds and symbols. In a frenzy of excitement, Champollion famously burst into his brother's office, shouted "Tiens mon affaire. I've got it," and promptly fainted from sheer exhaustion and exhilaration, remaining unconscious for 5 days. When he recovered, he presented his findings, and the world of Egyptology was born. Thanks to the Rosetta Stone and the brilliant obsession of Jean-François Champollion, the silent civilization of ancient Egypt began to speak again. We could now read their poetry, their medical texts, their love stories, and their spells for the afterlife. We could understand their history, not from the perspective of their Greek and Roman conquerors, but in their own words. The stone wasn't just a rock with 3 scripts. It was a time machine, a portal that allowed us to listen to the voices of a world that had been silent for 2,000 years. And it all started with a chance discovery by soldiers digging in the dirt. Thank you so much for watching this journey into the past. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories hidden in history. We'll see you in the next video. Have you ever stood before the Great Pyramids and wondered, not just how they were built, but why? What secrets do these ancient stones hold? For centuries, we saw them as just tombs, magnificent but silent. But what if I told you they could speak? What if the walls themselves could tell us the story of a civilization's deepest beliefs about life, death, and the cosmos? Today, we're not just looking at the pyramids, we're reading them. We're decoding the oldest religious writings in human history, hidden in plain sight for millennia. Let's travel back over 4,500 years to the time of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. Deep inside the earliest pyramids, like the one belonging to King Unas, archaeologists made a breathtaking discovery. The walls weren't bare, they were covered, from floor to ceiling, with columns of intricate hieroglyphs. These weren't just decorations. They were spells, hymns, and prayers. Scholars named them the Pyramid Texts. This is humanity's first great spiritual book, carved in stone. It's an instruction manual for eternity, a roadmap for the soul of a pharaoh on the most important journey of all, the journey into the afterlife. So, what do these texts actually say? Imagine you are the pharaoh, having just passed from the world of the living. Your spirit awakens inside the dark, sealed pyramid. The texts on the walls around you begin to glow, whispering instructions. They tell you how to rise, how to open the false door of your tomb, and ascend to the sky. One spell proclaims, "O Unas, you have not departed dead, you have departed living." This wasn't the end, it was a transformation. The texts were magical utterances, spoken or recited during funeral rites, and designed to be eternally spoken by the walls themselves, ensuring the king's successful passage. The journey they describe is epic. The pharaoh had to navigate a complex and often dangerous spiritual landscape. The texts are filled with spells to ward off threats, like supernatural serpents and hostile gatekeepers. They contain passwords to unlock celestial gates and affirmations to prove the pharaoh's divine right to join the gods. Think of it like a cosmic video game, where the pyramid texts are the ultimate cheat sheet. They equip the king with all the knowledge and power needed to overcome every obstacle and claim his place among the stars. And the stars were everything. The ancient Egyptians were master astronomers, and their religion was written in the night sky. The pyramid texts are obsessed with the heavens. They describe the pharaoh becoming an imperishable star, one of the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon. Why? Because these stars were seen as eternal, undying. By joining them, the pharaoh would achieve true immortality. One beautiful passage reads, "You will cross the sky with Ra. You will appear in the horizon. You will ascend from the eastern horizon of the sky." The king's destiny was not in the ground, but in the cosmos. This cosmic obsession is physically built into the pyramids themselves. Have you ever heard that the shafts inside the Great Pyramid of Giza point to specific stars? It's not a coincidence. The so-called air shafts weren't for ventilation. They were soul shafts, star shafts, from the king's chamber. One shaft points directly to the belt of Orion, which the Egyptians identified with the god Osiris, the king of the afterlife. The other shaft points to the circumpolar stars, the imperishables. From the queen's chamber, shafts point to Sirius, identified with the goddess Isis, and the star Kakab. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a launch pad, perfectly aligned to shoot the pharaoh's soul to its precise celestial destination. Let's look closer at the key players in this divine drama. The texts introduce us to a pantheon of gods who shaped this journey. There's Ra, the sun god, who the pharaoh would join on his daily voyage across the sky in a solar boat. There's Osiris, the god of resurrection, who was famously murdered and brought back to life. The pharaoh becomes Osiris, embodying the cycle of death and rebirth. Then there's Horus, the son of Osiris, the rightful heir. The living pharaoh was the earthly incarnation of Horus, and upon death, he would become Osiris, while his successor became the new Horus. The pyramid texts solidify this divine cycle of succession, ensuring cosmic order, or Mat, was maintained. But how did this transformation work? The texts are full of what are called utterances of glorification, These spells magically transformed the deceased king into a divine being. An Ankh. The Ankh was a transfigured spirit, luminous and powerful, able to travel freely between the earth and the heavens. The texts provide the words to make this happen. Rise up. Shake the earth. The gods are in dread of you. You have your spirit. You have your soul. These powerful words, repeated over and over, were believed to have the creative force to literally remake the pharaoh into a god. It is a stunning example of how the Egyptians believed in the power of the written and spoken word to shape reality itself, and it wasn't just about becoming a star. The pyramid texts also describe a cyclical journey with the sun god Ra. Each night, Ra's boat would travel through the Decode, the Egyptian underworld, a realm of darkness and danger. The pharaoh's spirit would join him, helping to fight off the chaos serpent Apep, who tried to swallow the sun and plunge the world into eternal darkness. By helping Ra defeat chaos, the pharaoh ensured that the sun would rise again the next morning. This meant the pharaoh wasn't just saving himself. He was actively participating in the daily renewal of the entire cosmos. His afterlife journey was essential for the survival of the world. What's truly incredible is how these ideas evolved. The pyramid texts were exclusively for royalty. But over centuries, these spells and beliefs trickled down. First, two nobles whose coffins were inscribed with similar writings, now known as the coffin texts. These included new spells and even a map of the underworld. Then, eventually, these beliefs became accessible to anyone who could afford a papyrus scroll to be buried with them. This became the famous Book of the Dead. So, the words first whispered in the darkness of a king's pyramid became the spiritual inheritance of an entire civilization, a testament to the enduring human hope for life beyond death. So, when we look at a pyramid, we should see more than a marvel of engineering. We should see a sacred machine, a resurrection device, precisely tuned to the heavens. The hieroglyphs covering its inner chambers are not just art. They are the software running this machine. They tell a story of a people who looked at the stars and saw not just points of light, but a map to eternity. They believed that death was not an end, but a doorway to a grander existence, a cosmic journey to become one with the gods. The pyramids are not silent tombs. They are shouting a message across the millennia, a message of hope, transformation, and rebirth, written in the language of the stars. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the pyramid texts. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the secrets of the ancient world. Let me know in the comments which aspect of the pyramids you find most mysterious. Until next time, keep exploring. For centuries, we've gazed at the Great Pyramids of Giza, marveling at their sheer scale and mystery. The common story we've all heard is that they were built by countless slaves, toiling under the whip of ruthless pharaohs. But what if I told you that story is largely a myth? What if the stones themselves could speak and tell us the real story of the people who built them? Well, in a way, they can. Today, we're peeling back the layers of sand and time to meet the real people behind the pyramids. The secret lies in a language of pictures, a code that unlocks the everyday lives of ancient Egyptians, hieroglyphs. Thanks to the tireless work of archaeologists and linguists, we've learned to read these intricate symbols. And what they reveal is not a story of oppression, but a story of community, skill, and even pride. Forget the Hollywood epics for a moment. The truth is far more fascinating. Let's start with the big question: who actually built these wonders? The evidence points overwhelmingly to skilled Egyptian laborers. These weren't nameless, faceless slaves. They were carpenters, stonemasons, metalworkers, and engineers. They had names, families, and lives. And we know this because their names are literally carved into the stone. In hidden chambers and on blocks that weren't meant to be seen, workers left graffiti. They signed their work, often with team names like the Drunkards of Menkaure or the Friends of Khufu. These weren't the markings of slaves. They were the proud signatures of craftsmen. Imagine a bustling construction site. The air is thick with the dust of limestone and the rhythmic sound of chisels striking stone. Here, we'd find teams of men, organized and efficient. And overseeing it all, the architects and project managers. One of the most famous is a man named Hemunu. He was the vizier and nephew of the pharaoh Khufu, the king for whom the Great Pyramid was built. A life-size statue of Hemunu was found in his tomb, showing a man of importance and intelligence. He was the master architect, the brilliant mind who orchestrated this monumental undertaking. He wasn't just a royal figure, he was the chief engineer of the ancient world's most ambitious construction project. His story shows us that the Pyramid Project was led by the best and brightest minds of the era. But how do we know so much detail about the day-to-day operations? We have to thank the ancient Egyptian bureaucrats, the scribes. These were the record keepers, the project managers of their day. Armed with papyrus scrolls, reed pens, and ink, they documented everything, and I mean everything. We've found papyrus documents like the famous Diary of Mirror, which is the personal logbook of an official who was involved in transporting limestone to the Giza Plateau. It's the oldest papyrus document ever discovered. Mirror's diary gives us an incredible window into the logistics of the project. He records the number of boat trips, the amount of stone transported, and the daily schedules. But it's the human details that are truly amazing. He tells us about the rations his crew received. Think about that for a second. These weren't scraps thrown to slaves. These were carefully recorded rations of bread, beer, onions, garlic, and fish. Beer was a staple of the ancient Egyptian diet, providing calories and hydration. This was fuel for a highly skilled workforce. These records paint a picture of a well-organized state project that took care of its employees. They were paid in food and other goods, which in a non-monetary economy was the standard form of payment for state-employed workers. The scribes also recorded titles and promotions. We see men moving up the ranks, from a simple laborer to a team leader. This tells us there was a hierarchy, a system of management, and opportunities for advancement. It shows a level of social mobility and personal achievement that we don't associate with slavery. The people who built the pyramids had careers. They were respected professionals, and their contributions were valued and recorded for eternity. So where did these thousands of workers live? For a long time, this was a mystery. But then, archaeologists discovered the remains of a lost city right next to the pyramids. This wasn't a slave camp, it was a planned urban center, a workers' village. Excavations have revealed bakeries large enough to produce thousands of loaves of bread every day. There were breweries, fish processing facilities, and long galleries that served as dormitories. The sheer scale of the food production facilities proves that the workforce was massive and well-fed. The animal bones found at the site tell another incredible story. The workers were eating a lot of high-quality meat, beef, mutton, and goat. These were not the typical meals of the poor. Beef, in particular, was a luxury. The fact that the pyramid builders were regularly eating prime cuts of meat is powerful evidence of their high status. They were the nation's elite builders, and the state was investing heavily in their well-being to ensure the project's success. Furthermore, medical analysis of skeletons found in the workers' cemetery shows that they suffered from work-related injuries, like broken bones and strained backs. But crucially, these injuries show signs of healing. They were receiving medical care. Broken limbs were set in splints. This is not the treatment you give to a disposable workforce. It's the care you provide to valuable, skilled specialists. The pyramids, then, are not just tombs for pharaohs. They are monuments to the people who built them. Every block of stone was quarried, transported, and set in place by human hands. Hands that belonged to men with names, with families waiting for them in the workers' village, with hopes for a good meal and a promotion. Their stories are not written in grand declarations on temple walls, but they are there, hidden in a scribe's daily log, a team name scrawled on a hidden block, and the healed bones of a stonemason. The hieroglyphs and the archaeological evidence have transformed our understanding. They've replaced the myth of slaves with the reality of proud Egyptian citizens working together on a national project of immense religious and cultural importance. They were building for their king, their gods, and their vision of eternity. They were building a legacy, not just for their pharaoh, but for themselves. So the next time you see a picture of the pyramids, look beyond the monumental scale. Think of Hemunu, the architect, planning every angle. Think of Mirror, the official, logging his cargo of stone. Think of the friends of Khufu crew, laughing and sharing a meal after a hard day's work. These were real people with real lives. And in a way, by building these eternal structures, they achieved a piece of immortality for themselves. Their human stories are carved right into the stone. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of history. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did you know the builders were skilled workers? See you in the next video. The inscriptions we find on tomb walls aren't just threats. They are potent spells, a spiritual security system designed to last for eternity. Imagine standing at the entrance of a freshly sealed tomb. Carved into the stone above the doorway, you see a series of hieroglyphs. These aren't just words, they're a warning. A typical curse might read something like this: "As for any man who shall enter this tomb in his impurity." Mostly, they were aimed at tomb robbers and vandals who might desecrate the sacred space. But more importantly, they were a magical barrier, a spiritual firewall intended to repel negative forces. One of the most famous examples is the supposed curse of the pharaohs linked to Tutankhamun's tomb. But let's look at the facts. Howard Carter, the man who actually entered the tomb first, lived for another 17 years. As long as a person's name was remembered and spoken, their soul, their Ba and Ka, could continue to exist in the afterlife. It was a visual spell, constantly active. You often see it on the pharaoh's crown, poised to strike. This wasn't just for decoration. The uraeus symbolized the goddess Wadjet, a fierce protector of the king and of Egypt itself. The magic was all about maintaining cosmic order, or mat. Any act of desecration, like robbing a tomb, wasn't just a crime. It was an act of chaos that disrupted mat. The protective spells were meant to restore that balance. They were a promise that even in death, the order of the universe would be upheld, and the soul would be safe. So, the next time you see a movie about a mummy's curse, remember the real story. It's a tale not of revenge, but of reverence. It's about the enduring power of a name, the magic embedded in a symbol, and the profound belief that words could create a pathway to eternity. The true magic of the tombs wasn't in their curses, but in the incredible effort to conquer death itself. Thanks so much for exploring this magical world with me today. What's your favorite Egyptian symbol? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the ancient world. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the sands of time. In our last episode, we explored the incredible stories told by the hieroglyphs on ancient Egyptian tomb walls. For centuries, these messages were a mystery. And even after the Rosetta Stone, many secrets remained locked away, lost to the ravages of time. Faded paint, damaged stone, and incomplete fragments meant that a huge part of the story was missing. But what if I told you that today, in the 21st century, we're finally starting to read the invisible ink of the past? Get ready, because modern technology is giving the pharaohs a brand new voice. For the longest time, a faded or broken hieroglyph was a dead end for archaeologists. You could guess, you could infer from context, but you could never be certain. Entire sentences, crucial details about rituals, family histories, or royal decrees were lost forever. Imagine trying to read a book with half the letters missing on every page. That's the challenge Egyptologists have faced for generations. They did incredible work with what they had, piecing together a civilization from these scattered clues. But the full picture always seemed just out of reach. That frustration, that feeling of knowing there's more to the story, has driven a new generation of researchers to look for answers not just in the dust, but in the digital world. And what they're finding is changing everything. Let us start with something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie. Artificial intelligence. You probably think of AI as something that recommends movies or powers your phone's assistant. But now, it's one of the most powerful tools in an Egyptologist's kit. Researchers have developed AI programs, specifically neural networks, and trained them on vast databases of known hieroglyphs. They feed the AI thousands upon thousands of examples of symbols, their variations from different dynasties, and their corresponding translations. The AI learns to recognize not just complete symbols, but also the faintest traces of them. So when it's shown a picture of a damaged wall with a half-erased symbol, it can analyze the remaining strokes, compare them to its massive library, and predict with incredible accuracy what the original hieroglyph was. It's like a digital version of the world's best code breaker, filling in the blanks in history's greatest puzzle. This isn't just about single words. These tools can reconstruct entire phrases, suggesting the most probable grammar and syntax, and offering translations that might have taken a human team months to decipher. But what if the writing isn't just damaged, but completely invisible to the naked eye? This is where another piece of amazing tech comes in: multispectral and infrared imaging. Over thousands of years, the vibrant pigments used by ancient Egyptian scribes have faded. Sunlight, moisture, and even the touch of human hands have worn them away. But often, tiny, microscopic traces of the original materials remain embedded in the stone. They're invisible to us, but not to specialized cameras. Infrared photography can see beyond the visible spectrum of light. It can detect the carbon-based remnants of black ink or the specific mineral signatures of different colored paints. When you take an infrared photo of a seemingly blank section of a wall, suddenly, faint outlines of hieroglyphs and drawings can appear like ghosts. It's an almost magical process. We're literally revealing writing that has been unseen for 3,000 years. This technique has uncovered everything from hidden drafts of texts where a scribe corrected a mistake to entire sections of poetry and prayers that were thought to be lost forever. It's like discovering a hidden chapter in your favorite book. Now, decoding the symbols is one thing, but what about preserving the tombs themselves? These structures are incredibly fragile. Tourism, environmental changes, and even the simple passage of time threaten their very existence. Once a wall collapses or the paint flakes off, that piece of history is gone. This is where 3D scanning technology, like LiDAR, has become absolutely essential. LiDAR works by bouncing millions of laser points off a surface to create an astonishingly detailed digital replica. Teams can now scan an entire tomb, from the longest corridors to the smallest chambers, with sub-millimeter accuracy. The result is a perfect, explorable 3D model. This has two huge benefits. First, it's a conservation miracle. If the real tomb were ever damaged, we would have a perfect digital blueprint to study and potentially even use for restoration. We've preserved it in the digital realm for all future generations. Second, it allows for unprecedented access. Researchers from anywhere in the world can virtually walk through a tomb on their computer, zoom in on a specific carving, and study it without ever setting foot inside and causing potential damage. These digital models can also be used to create immersive virtual reality experiences for the public, allowing people to explore the wonders of the Valley of the Kings from their own living rooms. The combination of these technologies is where things get truly mind-blowing. Imagine this: you put on a VR headset and you're standing in a digitally recreated tomb of Seti I. The walls look as they do today, a little faded and worn. But then, with the flick of a button, you overlay the data from the infrared scans. Faded colors become vibrant again, missing hieroglyphs reappear in holographic form, glowing on the walls. You click on a section of text, and the AI translation tool instantly shows you what it means. You're not just looking at a tomb, you're experiencing it as it was meant to be seen, with all its stories intact. This isn't some future dream. These are the tools being developed and used right now. It is a fusion of archaeology and technology that allows us to peel back the layers of time in a way that previous generations could only dream of. And because of this technological revolution, new discoveries are still happening every single year. It's a common misconception that we found everything there is to find in Egypt. Nothing could be further from the truth. Just recently, ground-penetrating radar, which can see structures buried under the sand, has revealed potential new chambers near existing tombs. Satellite imagery analysis helps archaeologists spot subtle patterns in the landscape that might indicate undiscovered settlements. And every time a new technology is applied to an old site, we learn something new. An AI might spot a grammatical quirk in a text that changes our understanding of a pharaoh's reign. A 3D scan might reveal a hidden architectural feature that no one had ever noticed before. The age of discovery in Egypt is not over. In many ways, it's just beginning. The ancient world still has so many stories to tell, and for the first time in history, we have the technology to listen. The science is unlocking a richer, more complete, and more awe-inspiring vision of this incredible civilization. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the tech that's rewriting history. It's truly an exciting time to be fascinated by ancient Egypt. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next chapter. We're going to be looking at the everyday lives of the people who built and decorated these magnificent tombs. See you then. Imagine ancient Egypt. What do you see? Towering pyramids, the enigmatic Sphinx, golden treasures from a pharaoh's tomb. For centuries, these were just silent monuments, their stories locked away. The people who built them were a mystery, their world a grand, beautiful puzzle with all the pieces missing. What changed? How did we go from staring at silent stone to hearing the voices of the past? The answer is hieroglyphs. The story of cracking the code is one of history's greatest detective tales. It started with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 by French soldiers. This slab of black basalt was the key. For over 2 decades, the brightest minds in Europe were stumped. They thought hieroglyphs were just symbolic pictures, not a real language. A picture of a bird meant a bird, a wavy line meant water. They were partly right, but also completely wrong. The breakthrough came from a brilliant French scholar named Jean-François Champollion. He obsessed over the stone, realizing that the hieroglyphs weren't just simple pictures. If I write the letter B, it doesn't look like anything in the real world, it's just a symbol for a sound. Champollion figured out that the Egyptians did the same thing. He focused on the names of rulers like Ptolemy and Cleopatra, which were circled in a special oval shape called a cartouche. Since he knew their names from the Greek text, he could match the sounds to the hieroglyphic symbols. And the ancient language began to speak for the first time in nearly 2,000 years. It was like a light suddenly switching on in a vast, dark room. And what did we find? A world more vibrant and complex than anyone could have imagined. We pieced together timelines, understanding how the kingdom rose, fell, and rose again over millennia. We discovered their laws, their medical texts, their love poems, and even their grocery lists. The texts found inside and around them tell us they were resurrection machines for the pharaohs, stairways to the stars designed to ensure the king's rebirth among the gods. The pyramid wasn't just a building, it was a fusion of architecture, text, and culture. The words gave the stones their meaning. Every carving, every inscription adds a layer of depth. We can now walk through a temple and not just admire the art, but read the stories. It tells the story of a great battle, a coronation, a sacred festival. The hieroglyphs transform these places from ancient ruins into living museums, libraries written in stone. So, why does any of this matter today? Because understanding the past is how we understand ourselves. The Egyptian civilization was one of the longest-lasting and most influential in human history. They were pioneers in writing, medicine, architecture, and government. By studying them, we learn about the very foundations of civilization itself. The hieroglyphs aren't just about Egypt. They're about the human drive to communicate, to leave a mark, to tell our story, and achieve a form of immortality. Every time we write something down, we're continuing a tradition that the Egyptians helped to pioneer thousands of years ago. They showed us the power of the written word to transcend time and speak to future generations. Hieroglyphs also remind us that there are always new worlds to discover, even within our own history. For centuries, a whole civilization was lost in plain sight. It took curiosity, dedication, and a new way of thinking to unlock it. It's a powerful lesson. It teaches us not to take things at face value, to always ask questions, and to believe that the secrets of the past can be revealed. The story of hieroglyphs is the ultimate story of discovery. It shows how one breakthrough can completely change our perception of the world and our place in the long, winding river of human history. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey back in time as fascinating as I did, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the secrets of the past. Let me know in the comments what ancient mystery you'd like us to decode next. See you in the next one.
As we close this chapter of the Chrono Archives, remember, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the shadows of forgotten ruins, in the echoes of ancient voices, and in the timeless lessons that still guide us today. It waits to be remembered by curious minds like yours. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the annals of time. If today's exploration of lost civilizations, mythical legends, or historical enigmas ignited your passion for the past, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your favorite moment or what you'd love to see next, and most importantly, subscribe to the Chrono Archives and continue the journey through time. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode where we unearth buried secrets, decode ancient mysteries, and bring history's greatest stories back to life. Together, we'll keep the flame of the past burning bright. Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep remembering. The Chrono Archives, where the past lives forever.